Hello, my friends. Welcome to Tommy Podcast on English Every Day. It's so good to have you with me again. And you know, every time I record an episode, it feels like we're walking side by side, just talking without any rush. Maybe you're washing the dishes. Maybe you're on your way to work. Maybe you're lying on the couch. Wherever you are, imagine me sitting there with you, like a friend sharing a story. Before today's topic, let me share a funny comment I got from João. He wrote, "Tommy, I tried listening to the podcast while running on the treadmill, but I got so caught up in your story that I lost the rhythm and almost fell. Now, I only listen sitting down. I laughed so much at that. So if you're moving right now, be careful not to trip. This podcast is dangerous." Today, I want to talk about something that might also be your reality: failure. Because my journey wasn't a straight line of progress. Not at all. I failed for years trying to learn English. And I failed so many times that I almost believed it wasn't for me. I remember the first time I decided I was going to be fluent. It was the start of a new year. I bought a brand new notebook, downloaded apps, made a huge list of goals. I wrote things like, study 2 hours every day, watch 1 full movie in English every week, learn 20 new words every day. On paper, it looked amazing. But guess how long it lasted? 1 week. By the second week, I was already tired, skipping, days, making excuses. And before I knew it, I had abandoned the whole plan. I felt defeated. Have you ever gone through that too? That big excitement at the beginning that slowly turns into frustration because we just can't keep it up? I repeated that cycle many times. Every time I saw someone speaking English, I thought, this time, I'll make it. I made another giant plan, full of rules, and then gave up halfway again. Until one day, I realized it wasn't about capacity. It was about how I was trying. I remember an online course I bought. The teacher said, "If you don't study at least 1 hour a day, you will never learn." That felt so heavy, because I couldn't do it. I had work, responsibilities, tiredness. I started motivated, but the moment I missed a day, I felt like a total failure. And then I quit again. One moment I'll never forget was during a trip. I was at the airport and heard a child, maybe 8 years old, speaking English naturally with their parents. That hurt me. I thought, if a child can do it, why can't I? The answer was hard, because I was trying in the wrong way and right. There, sitting in that boarding area, I made a promise to myself. No more giant goals. I'll start small, but I'll keep going. That deep failure planted the seed of change. But before I tell you how I changed, let me share a scene that sums up my failures. I was in a cafe, studying with my notebook. I had written huge word lists. One of them was window. I knew it meant janela. I repeated it many times, wrote it down. But a few hours later, when a friend asked me in English, "Can you open the window?" I froze. I knew the word, but it didn't come. In the end, my friend just stood up and opened it himself. I sat there, speechless. That day showed me that memorizing lists wasn't enough, because English doesn't happen on paper. It happens in life. And that's when the idea started to grow, to practice in a different way. Lighter, more practical, more connected to real life. But I'll share more about that in the next episodes. For now, I just want you to keep this picture in mind. Failure wasn't my enemy. It was my teacher. Every time I quit, I learned something new about myself. I learned that perfection kills. Consistency. I learned that giant plans don't survive real life. I learned that fear grows when you only study, but never speak. And maybe you are at that exact point right now. Maybe you've tried many times and quit. Maybe you think you weren't born to learn English. But let me tell you, if I could break that cycle of failure, you can too. Repeat this with me now, like a declaration to yourself. I can try again. Yes, you can always try again. One of the biggest traps that made me fail for years was perfectionism. I thought I could only open my mouth in English when I had the perfect sentence in my head. So I stayed silent, waiting for the right moment, but that moment never came. It's like someone who only wants to play guitar after knowing all the songs. That moment doesn't exist. There was a day when a foreign colleague asked me something simple at work. Do you have a pen? I understood it. I even had a pen in my pocket. But instead of answering fast, I was trying to build a perfect, elegant, mistake-free sentence. The result? I froze in silence. And when I finally opened my mouth, he had already asked someone else. I was still holding the pen, defeated, thinking I knew the answer. Why didn't I speak? Repeat with me now, as if you are in that scene, giving the pen. Yes, I have a pen. See how simple it is? But perfectionism stopped me from speaking. Another mistake that really blocked me was comparison. I looked at classmates who seemed more talented and thought, they have a gift. I don't. That comparison stole my energy. Because instead of looking at my progress, I looked at other people's speed. Once, I went to an English learners meetup. While some people were talking happily, I stayed quiet, just listening. At the end of the night, I walked out sad, thinking, I'll never speak like them. Only years later I realized many of them had been studying for much longer than me. It was like comparing my 1-kilometer jog with someone already training for a marathon. Totally unfair to myself. And of course, fear of judgment was another huge obstacle. I was sure that if I opened my mouth and made a mistake, everyone would laugh at me. But you know what I discovered later? Most of the time, people don't even care. They just want to understand. I remember a funny scene in a diner. I wanted to order a cheeseburger, but I messed it up. Instead of saying cheese, I said something strange, almost like chiz. The waiter smiled, repeated the correct word, and gave me my food. I walked away red with embarrassment. But thinking back, he didn't laugh at me. He didn't judge me. He just corrected me and moved on. The shame was only in my head. That moment taught me something important. Shame lasts a few seconds, but the experience stays. Every time I took the risk, even stumbling, I was training. Another trap was believing in magic formulas. I bought books promising fluency in 3 months, courses with fast results. And every time I didn't reach that promise, I felt like a failure again, until I realized there is no shortcut. There is only the road, step by step. I like to think of it like learning to drive. You don't learn in one class. You need practice, mistakes, repetition. And nobody expects a beginner to drive perfectly. So why was I expecting perfection from myself in English? It was around that time that I started to change the way I saw my mistakes. Before, Every error was proof that I wasn't good enough. But then I began to see each mistake as a teacher. If I forgot a word, that showed me exactly what I needed to practice. If I froze, it was a sign that I was leaving my comfort zone. One moment that shows this well was when a tourist asked me, "What time is it?" I understood the question, but I froze again. Only after some seconds I managed to answer, "It's 10 o'clock." I felt frustrated. But later I thought, look, I understood the question. That's already progress. Before, I wouldn't even understand. Repeat with me now, as if you are answering on the street. "It's 10 o'clock. There you go. You already have that answer ready for the next time someone asks. These repeated failures showed me that English itself wasn't what was stopping me. My unrealistic expectations were. I wanted perfection. I wanted to run before I could walk. And every time I fell, I gave up. Until one day I realized falling is part of training. Today, looking back, I see it clearly. It wasn't vocabulary I was missing. It wasn't talent. What blocked me was how I faced the process. I wanted fast results without going through the slow road. And this is where the real turning point begins, which I'll share with you in the next episodes. But for now, keep this with you. The mistakes you make are not proof of weakness. They are signs of progress. Every freeze, every forgotten word, every funny pronunciation is one more step up the ladder. After so many failures, I started to notice a pattern. Every time I tried to make the perfect plan, I quit. Every time I waited to feel confident before speaking, I froze. So I decided to flip the logic. Instead of waiting for confidence to speak, I would speak to build confidence. Instead of chasing the perfect plan, I would just do what was possible, even if it was small. The first change was giving up those endless word lists. I used to write down dozens of words and then forget all of them. This time, I decided to choose just one word or phrase each day and actually use it. For example, I remember when I picked the word hungry. I spent the whole day repeating it in different moments. When I opened the fridge, I said, "I'm hungry." Before lunch, I whispered, "I'm hungry." It felt funny. But by the end of the day, that word never left my head again. Repeat with me now, as if you are opening the fridge. "I'm hungry." That method taught me something important. Quality is more valuable than quantity. One word, really lived during the day, is worth more than 20 memorized and forgotten. The second change was practicing out loud without fear of looking silly. Before, I was even shy to talk to myself. But then I started turning small moments of my day into secret training. Once on the bus, I looked out the window and said quietly, "I see cars." Another time, while cooking, I said, "I'm cutting tomatoes." It looked like a kid's game, but in reality, it was adult training. And the amazing thing was, the more I practiced alone, the more natural it felt when the chance came to speak with someone. It was like training in the locker room before stepping onto the field. One day, this preparation showed up in practice. I was at a cafe, and the barista asked me, "Do you want sugar?" Without thinking, I answered, "Yes, a little sugar." It was simple, but automatic. And I realized my secret practice was showing up in real life. Another strategy I learned was to laugh at my mistakes. Before, every mistake felt like a tragedy. Now, I decided to treat them as jokes. I remember one day I tried to say beach, but my pronunciation came out strange, almost like another word you can imagine. The person laughed. I laughed too. And from that day on, I never forgot the difference. I discovered that laughter cures fear. Another important change was creating small daily promises to myself. I know. Longer promised 2 hours of study every day. Instead, I promised simple things like, today I will say 3 sentences in English. Sometimes I did that right in the morning while making coffee. And just the fact of keeping a small promise gave me motivation to continue. I also started using short dialogues as training. Instead of memorizing single phrases, I created mini-scenes in my head. For example, I imagined myself walking into a store. Hello. Hi. Can I help you? Yes. I'm looking for a book. I repeated that little scene alone, like rehearsing a play. At first it felt strange, but soon I noticed those scenes stayed in my memory. And when a real situation came, I already had the dialogue ready. Repeat with me now, as if you are entering a store. I'm looking for a book. That phrase, simple and practical, can actually be used in a bookstore. And maybe the most powerful shift was accepting that I could start again. Every day. Before, every time I failed, I quit for months. Now, if I missed a day, I simply continued the next one. I stopped seeing English as a project with a deadline and started seeing it as part of my life, something continuous. That change of mindset was liberating. Because I was no longer fighting against time or perfection, I was simply walking, one step at a time. And each step, no matter how small, was taking me away from failure and closer to fluency. I like to think of it as climbing stairs. Before, I tried to jump several steps at once and ended up falling. Now, I climb slowly, one step per day. It may look slower, but it's the way that truly works. And it was in this process, practicing simple phrases, laughing at mistakes, creating small goals, and accepting restarts, that I finally began to feel something I had never felt before. True progress. Not perfect, but consistent. Today, looking back, I realize that my failures were not enemies. They were teachers. Every attempt that didn't work showed me a path I shouldn't follow. Every fall taught me a new way to stand up. And it was exactly this collection of failures that led me to the discovery of what really works. Practicing in a simple, daily human way. I used to believe that failure was a full stop. Now I understand it's only a comma, because after each stumble, I could continue the sentence of my story. And that's how my journey in English stopped being a sequence of quitting and became a sequence of restarts. I'll never forget a scene that symbolizes this change. I was traveling and stopped at a bakery. The cashier asked me, "What do you want?" Before, I would have frozen, trying to build the perfect answer. But that day, I simply said, "1 bread, please." She smiled, understood, gave me the bread. I walked out feeling like I had just won a marathon. Not because of advanced English, but because I spoke without fear. Repeat with me, as if you are in that scene. 1 bread, please. Simple, but powerful. That moment showed me something important. Speaking English is not about impressing. It's about communicating. It's not about showing knowledge. It's about creating connection. And when we understand that, the weight of fear gets lighter. I want you to think now about the times you failed. Maybe you quit a course. Maybe you froze in a conversation. Maybe you felt ashamed, like I did many times. But let me tell you, none of that defines you. Those failures are part of the process, not the end of it. The secret is to continue. The secret is to get up after every fall. The secret is to turn "I failed" into "I learned." I could have quit long ago. Maybe today I would be telling people, I don't have talent for languages. But because I insisted, because I turned my failures into fuel, today I can share this story with you in English and Portuguese, mixing both as part of who I am. And I want you to have that same experience. It doesn't matter if you feel you failed many times. It doesn't matter if your journey has many interruptions. You can restart today, right now. So here is the challenge I leave for you. Think about a mistake you made recently in English. Maybe a forgotten word, a wrong pronunciation, a moment when you froze. Now, turn that mistake into practice. If you forgot a word, repeat it 5 times out loud today. If you froze in a sentence, say that simple sentence now, without fear. For example, remember the scene with the tourist asking the time? Say it with me. It's 10 o'clock. Done. You just turned a possible failure into real practice. And after you do this, I want you to come back here and share in the comments. Which mistake did you transform into training? I want to read it, because I'm sure your story will inspire other people who also think they failed. Before we finish, let me repeat something I wish I had heard at the beginning. Failing is not a sign of incapacity. It's a sign of trying. The only people who never fail are the ones who never try. And the ones who try every day, sooner or later, make it. So next time you feel like you didn't succeed, remember what we talked about today. It's not the end. It's just another comma. Start again the next day. Because consistency is more powerful than perfection. And if this episode made sense to you, give that little support by clicking the red button. It doesn't judge your mistakes. It's just happy when you click. I'm truly grateful for every minute you spend here with me. Because this community exists to show that we are not alone in this journey. I failed, you failed too. But together, we can transform every failure into victory. Keep this sentence with you. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of it. I'm Tommy Podcast from English Every Day. Bye-bye.